Okay, so where can we start? I'd like to start with, let's just go back as far as possible. Like start talking about your earliest memory.
Yeah. Well, I don't remember when I was born, but I was. Anyway, I was born in a log cabin, just down the hill from Grandpa and Grandma's, just about where the pond is down there.
Uh-huh.
Looks like he's got a whale in his pond, but it's a duck.
Oh, is that one of the ducks that lives up the hill there?
Yeah. Well, they're white ducks, but
They
that's
live on
a
the
dark.
pond.
Huh?
Do they?
Yeah, that's not a white one though. The two that lives up the hill are white ducks. Anyway, our house was down the hill, and it was a log cabin, and that was the only home that we ever owned when Daddy was at home. And so.
About when would that be? What, approximately what year?
31. I was born in 31.
Okay.
In July 31st of 31. And then Daddy sold that house to Uncle Olin, his brother. And I don't remember where we moved to from there, because we moved a lot all over the state of Arkansas. Daddy was a sharecropper after that. And we didn't live in any one place in particular for several years. We just moved around. Sometimes 3 or 4 times a year during a school year we'd move around. But while we were up in the mountains, I was there till I was in the 3rd grade. And then we moved down to southern Arkansas. But going to school there, we didn't have swings or balls or any toys to play with, but we would go into the woods and had ropes in the trees and things to swing in. That was our school toys.
Yeah.
And there was a big stove, I remember, in the middle of the room, a huge big stove, probably 6 or 7 foot around the belly, and it stood right in the middle of the room, and that's what they warmed the school with.
And it was a one-room school?
That was in the room that we were in. It was one big room. It had 2 or 3 classes in it, different grades.
Okay.
And so I remember that stove. It impressed me. But we would clear off a place, and then we'd edge the cleared place with rocks, and then we'd put other rocks for chairs and tables and stoves and play house at school. That's what we did to entertain ourselves. And then I remember when Loretta was born. She was born down in the woods on the Watson place, way back in the woods. And the house was later abandoned. Nobody lived there for years and years now. It's probably on the ground. But then when Loretta was born, or when Frank was born, we lived in that same house again. And
the one that you were
where
born in?
I was born in. We lived there. And up the hill was the Watson family lived up there, but it was not the one where Loretta was born. Okay. And Mama was up there doing washing one day, and Maxine was cutting wood. She was 5 years older than me, so she was probably 10 at that time. And the axe slipped and cut her foot open from the little toe right up to the leg. And I remember running up the hill to tell Mama, Maxine cut herself, but Frank was born up on the hill there.
Hold on. So you were 5 years old and you ran up the hill to tell her that? Yeah.
Yeah, I was.
What happened then? Because it must have been
Well,
bleeding
Grandpa
all
was a
over.
country doctor.
Yeah.
And so we just took her to him, and he taped it together, put some medicine on it, probably whiskey, I don't remember, but some kind of an antiseptic, and taped it up, and it wasn't sewed. But then later on, when Frank was born, he was born in that house where Mama was doing the laundry up there. We lived on that place. And they took us kids up to Grandpa and Grandma's. They wouldn't let us stay there because they always told us kids were found in a stump out in a pasture. And the cows found us. And so
Oh, you mean they told you that's where
what
kids
they
came
told
from?
us. That,
Instead of
yeah,
the stork?
they were born in the cows found them in a stump. And so anyway, that they wouldn't let us stay there that day. But I remember very well the day Frank was born because they took us away. And we had to go up to Grandpa and Grandma's and stay that day. And then when we went back home, there was a baby brother. And
By that time, you had some idea. I mean, about how old were you?
She
when
was
you
only
born?
4.
well, I was probably 7 at that time.
Okay.
Oh, let's see, how old is Frank? I don't remember.
He'll be 69 next month.
Well, I'm 73, so 4 years older than him.
Okay.
I was still just young then.
So you didn't know.
I was
mean,
just
you
a
really
kid,
thought
4
that the
yeah,
kids
3
came
or 4
from.
years old.
Okay, I'm getting the picture now.
Yeah, and so anyway, this is kind of not very nice, but it was something that really happened. Mama was changing Frank's diaper one time, and Gladys, we didn't have any boys in the family, you know, so we didn't see a boy, but just girls. And Gladys said, "What is that?" And Mama said, "That's his heart." And she said, "I wish I had a heart like that." Oh, we always laughed about that through the years. And then when we left the mountains, we went down to McClellan. Dad had some cousins that lived down there. Their names was Gaskins, and he thought he could find work down there. So we went down there, and we had a one-seated Model A coupe with a turtle hull. And I remember I was up over the seat behind Mom and Daddy. It only had one seat, and Loretta was up there with me and our cat. And Daddy was drunk, and so thought he saw the driveway to their house, and it wasn't. It was a board. It was just a board laid across the irrigation ditch for the people to walk across. It was a little footbridge type of thing. And he said, "Oh, here it is," and he turned. And he turned our car over in that ditch. Was no water, but turned the car over. And as it rolled over, Mama hollered, "Oh, Olin!" And our cat ran away, and we never did find it.
Did she say anything more than that, or just "Oh,
That's all
Olin"?
she said, just "Oh, Olin." And we stayed with the Gaskins 3 or 4 days, and Daddy was always, he didn't want to impose on anyone. He was real good about that. So we didn't stay but 3 or 4 days down there, and he didn't find a job, so we went back up to the mountains. And we went through a little town, and he went in the bar and was already drinking, and so Mama got us kids out of the car, and we walked up one side of the street and back down the other side, and there was a monkey up in a tree, and he jumped out of the tree right on Loretta, and so we called her Monkey.
Yeah.
And from then on.
Still call her that.
Still call her Monkey.
Yeah.
And that was funny that he jumped into that crowd, and she was the one he landed on.
Well, what is a monkey doing running around in Arkansas?
I don't know. It was in that tree. I don't know, in the outskirts of town. And so Mama said if I had the money, we'd just catch a bus and go back up to Clinton and leave him here. So she went to the Greyhound bus depot, and he said they told her the ticket would be $4.08. And so we walked up one side, and Mama was worried because she had 6 kids at that time. 5, I guess, of us. And so there was a lady with a long white dress on, and she walked up one side, and we passed her going the opposite direction. And on the other side, when she passed Mama, she reached out and took her hand and just went right on down the road. And Mama opened her hand to see and it was $4.08.
Come on, really?
Yeah. And
Wow.
she was, I remember Mama was amazed at that. And she turned to tell the lady thank you, and she was gone. We never saw her again.
Like an angel.
And so we didn't catch the Greyhound, though. By the time we got back to the car, Daddy was ready to go, and we went on back up to the mountains. eventually we wound up in Southern California, Arkansas, and
Southern Arkansas.
yeah, and Daddy got jobs on different farms as a sharecropper, and when one crop was gathered, we'd have to move to another farm and gather that crop, and then move to another farm and gather that crop. And we lived on.
Would the kids help with that? Would you actually go out in the fields and work, or did you stay at home and
No, we
you
didn't.
went out and worked?
We didn't work in the fields at that time.
How about your mom? Would
No,
she go out?
No, Mama never did work. She told me she was born with an enlarged heart, and she wasn't able to work, and never did learn to drive either, so she was kind of handicapped.
That wasn't uncommon in her generation, though, was it? Not to drive.
Well, I don't know about her. Her mother didn't drive, but they didn't have cars. We didn't have a car until I was old enough to remember Daddy driving pulling into the driveway in this car. He paid, I think he paid $17 for this little Model A coupe that we had, and had a turtle hull. It was cute.
Just to give a perspective on $17, then a person might make 50 cents in a day. A workman might make 50 cents a day.
He might at that time. He might have been making maybe $5 a week, $5 or $6 a week.
Okay.
But up in the Ozarks before I was born, or maybe the time I was born, but he cut railroad ties by hand with an axe, and they
I've
paid
seen some of those.
50 cents a day.
I mean, I've seen some railroad ties that you can see were cut by hand.
the
You
chop
can see
marks.
the chop marks in them.
Yeah, that's
How
that's
much? 50 cents
50
a day?
cents a day, and that
Imagine.
was hard labor, very hard labor, and when Mama was sick up in the mountains before Daddy really started drinking bad, was when Mama was sick, she always wanted tomatoes, any kind of tomatoes, tomato soup, canned tomatoes, raw tomatoes, any kind of tomatoes. And so Daddy would ride a horse and go all over the mountains and see if anybody had any canned tomatoes that he could get for Mama. And he'd bring her a quart of tomatoes if he could find some, and she would seem to get better. But down in the mountain, down in the lower Arkansas, we lived on the Mississippi River for a while, and Daddy had a trout line, which meant he had maybe 8 or 10 different fishing lines in the water, and we had to ride a boat up and down the Mississippi to check and see if his lines had a fish. And Loretta was about 4 years old, I think, and she and I were in the boat with Daddy that day checking his trout line, and she had a little bucket in her hand, and she reached over to get a bucket of water out of the Mississippi, and she fell over. The bucket was heavier than she was, and it pulled her into the water, and that was funny. Daddy had to jump in and get her out.
Did she have any idea how to swim, or was she just
No,
wild?
she was too little. She didn't swim. I'm going back and forth, but as my
No, that's okay.
mind goes back over that part of our life, we played in the woods a lot up there at Grandpa and Grandma's, and their Uncle Olin and Uncle Willie had a big house full of kids like Daddy and Mama did, and we run in a pack all over the mountains. And we had a dog named Louis. He was an Airedale, and he was like a brother to us. And there was bears and snakes and panthers, all kinds of things in the mountains that would hurt us, but if anything came close, Louis would kill it. And he wasn't happy just to kill it, but he tore it apart. He'd pull the legs off
Really?
and the ears and throw it over the hillside. Yeah, he was like a brother to us, and very protective.
Airedales are good dogs. I've always heard they're very smart dogs.
Yeah, he was very intelligent, and he knew what we were saying when we talked to him. But we run in a pack, and there was a place we would slide down a rock, and at the bottom of it was a pond of water, and we'd slide down into that, and we played down there a lot. We didn't have to go home to eat because there was a lot of wild grapes and berries and all kinds of stuff to eat.
Yeah.
And we could stay in the woods all day long and not have to go home to eat and not get hungry. And there was Uncle Herman and Aunt Flossie Taylor lived through the woods from that place where Frank was born. And you had to go through over a pasture and down a valley and up the other side, and they lived over there. It was dense woods where they lived. And they had a slate. The hillside was slate, and they built us a little sled, and we'd slide down that slate slide, we'd call it. And we could play down there all day too. And down on the creek there was wild, we called them flags, but they were wild iris, and we call them flags. And we'd pick bouquets and little bouquets for Mama. And
so how many kids would that have been running around in that little group? And who was it?
well, Uncle Willie, Daddy's youngest brother, had Vernas and Lionel and Ramona, or Vivian, and then later he had other kids, but at that time there was 4 of them. There was one, I don't remember, Elaine was the 4th one. No, that was Uncle Lolan's little girl. That was, Uncle Willie had Vernas and Vivian and Lionel, that I remember at that time. And then Uncle Lolan had Dorval and Ramona and Betty and Elaine, and that was all that he had at that time. And I think there was 4 or 5 of us. Frank wasn't big enough to run around with us over the hillside back then.
11 or 12 kids?
About that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
That's a pack of kids.
There was
running
probably
around.
12 or 15 of us that run together.
And all related. All cousins,
yeah,
basically.
Yeah, all first cousins, and we run in a pack always. And poor Grandma, we'd go up to her house and once cookies or something, she always had cookies. And she tried to entertain us, and sometimes she would get frustrated with the gang of us wanting something, or a jelly biscuit with jelly on it or something, and she'd say, "Oh dear, oh dear." I can still see her doing that.
She was so tiny, huh?
And she was just 4'11". Grandpa was 6'2". And
What a combination.
yeah.
Hey, I have a question for you. A memory that I have of one of the sisters was caught by a hog carrying a biscuit and caught
That was me.
Was it? Do you
Yeah.
still have the scar from it?
Yeah.
Tell us that story.
This knuckle here.
Yeah.
Well, I was 6 or 7 months old, and I don't remember it, only that I've heard about it enough that it's real to me.
Yeah.
But Daddy and Mama, back there, the chickens and the pigs and the cows, all the stock just run wild so they could feed themselves in the woods. And so we had this big sow. She was huge. I don't, probably 150 pounds or 200 pounds, big sow. And Daddy and Mama were working in the garden, and he had a 6-foot fence he'd built around the garden to keep the animals out from eating our garden stuff. And I was on a pallet in the front yard in the house, and Gladys went in and got something to eat and brought me a biscuit, and she handed it to me, and that sow smelled it, and she tried to get the biscuit, but she accidentally got my middle finger.
Oh, she didn't mean to do it.
No, it was an accident, and she just wanted the biscuit, but she got my finger, and then she panicked, and she ran with me, and she ran down the holler and started up the other side, and Daddy heard me screaming, and Gladys was screaming, and he jumped over that 6-foot fence.
Pulling you? Oh, your dad did.
How old was he?
No, your dad jumped over the 6-foot fence?
Yeah. Yeah, Daddy
Wow.
jumped over the 6-foot fence, and he chased her down, and she was going up the hill on the other side, and he picked up a rock and threw it at her so she turned me loose because she was dragging me along. And it broke her leg. And he wouldn't even kill her. He went over to the neighbors and he said, "The old sow's laying over there with a broken leg." if you want her, go get her. And he went and killed her and dressed her out. And
He didn't want it because he was mad at it?
uh-huh.
He was angry
But
at the
she
hog?
said it set up blood poison in my body. And
Oh.
my arm swelled, and I didn't go to the doctor.
Uh-huh.
And my arm swelled and popped open there from the blood poison that I had in
Oh,
my system.
so that's not the scar from the bite. That's a scar from the blood poison.
Yeah, this is from the blood poison where my arm popped open.
Wow.
And
Good thing you're too young to remember that, because it must have been horrible.
really, yeah, it just swelled up so big it couldn't handle it anymore, and it popped open. And Grandpa was the only doctor we ever had, but he was good. He wanted to go to medical school, and he couldn't afford the books. And Grandpa was a blacksmith and a carpenter and a musician, and he did all kinds of trades. He was a very talented man, and but he was the only doctor we ever went to. And we had a game that we played at the school called Jump the Board, and we'd have it probably was a 12 by 2 by 16 board, and we'd put a brace under the middle of it, and we would stand on the ends of it and bounce like a teeter-totter, only we stood up. And we'd try to bounce each other as high as they could go. And we probably went 5 or 6 foot high, because we'd come down real hard on that board and then shoot that other one up in the air.
Oh, I bet that was a blast.
And I still would like to do that. And
Let's go set up a board, Eli.
you have to be, it will split on you. It will turn if you don't come down on it just right. The board would what we call split. It would twist, and then you both fall.
Because it's going to send you off at some odd angle then, right?
Yeah, it's not attached to anything. It's just loose, laying on this brace in the middle. See, it's not nailed down or anything. No straps over it or nothing. It was just a loose board, and if you don't come down on it just right, then it would split. And I come down on it so hard, Loretta and I, we'd go way up in the air and we'd go do the splits, or we'd do this way, and we'd do little antics up in the air when we'd way up in there. And I came down one time so hard that I got a stone bruise on my heel, one of my heel, and it got pus all in the ball of my heel. It filled up with pus that night, and I couldn't walk on it. And they took me over to Grandpa's, and he took his pocket knife and cut it open, and poured alcohol on it, and cleaned it out and put alcohol on it, and he bandaged it up. And I wanted to go home, and he wouldn't let me go home. He said, "No, you got to stay all night, because we got to do that again tomorrow." So
when you say alcohol, do you mean whiskey?
And so the next day, that night when I went to bed, I thought, well, I think I'll go home anyway. And it's not very far from here to Uncle Olin's, and it's not very far from Uncle Olin's to Grandma Bell's. It's not far from there to school. It's not far from there to the store. And it's not far from there to home. Actually, it was probably about a 3-mile journey, but I'm working all this out, so I won't be afraid to go in the middle of the night by myself. And I almost did it, and I thought, boy, Grandpa will give me a whipping like I never had a whipping before if I do that. So I stayed the night, but I sure didn't want to. I never had stayed all night away from Mama before. And the next day, then he got his pocket knife and he cut my heel open, and he dressed it, and he let me go home that day.
Do you still have a scar on there?
No, it didn't make a scar. But it sure was painful. It was just a full pus. And so.
You gonna ask something, Eli?
Yeah.
Then not too long after that, we moved down to Clinton, downtown, and that's when Daddy left us to go to to California. And I was awake all night because I didn't want him to go. He'd never been away before. And I was listening for him, and he got up probably around 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't know how he left. I don't know how he got to the bus depot or what. But I remember seeing him walked down the hall, and I was watching for him, and he went ahead and left. And later I wrote him a letter, and I said, I saw you go down the hall in your undershorts when you left, the day you were leaving. And I was real surprised. That's my daddy. And
How old were you at that point?
I was 8 or 9 at that time, about 9, I suppose. And
Could I ask you some more questions about that?
sure.
A couple things. One, I want to just clear up. Since Grandpa had alcohol around, whiskey, but was he a drinking man?
Was Daddy or
No,
Grandpa?
Grandpa.
No, Grandpa didn't drink at all. He never did drink.
So
He never did drink. But Daddy had, for a while, he moonshined. He was making bootleg liquor, and that was a dangerous thing. If you found their still, they'd kill
They'd
you.
shoot you, yeah.
Yeah, they would. They'd just shoot you on the spot, so you wouldn't tell on them. And the revenuers would come up in there and prowl the woods looking for stills, and sometimes they'd find one and arrest everybody involved. And Daddy did that for a while, but he never got caught.
Were any of you children, and I'm talking about the period of time just before he left, that morning that you saw him leave, Grandpa leave, your dad, were you close to him, or what was your relationship? Do you remember much of your relationship with him at that point?
No, I just remember he was home. I don't remember what kind of work he did or anything, but he could do any kind of work, whatever anyone needed done, a mechanic or a carpenter or anything. He just did what he could to make a living. At that time, he didn't have any particular trade that I remember. But we didn't see him for a while after he came to California. And then he came back, and when he came back, Maxine came to California with him, and they picked cotton, and she was 12 years old. And
she had left school at that point, right?
well,
I think
it was
graduated
summertime.
8th grade.
During the summer, they worked in the crops, and then she would go to school when school started. But she worked that one year with Daddy, and then they came back to Arkansas. And by that time, we had moved over on Aunt Belle's place, and that house had been empty for 2 years. No one had lived there, and there was no furniture, but just a set of old coil springs, no mattress or anything. And it wasn't box springs; it was just coil springs. And in the kitchen was like a picnic table with 2 benches and a wood stove, and that's all the furniture we had in the house. And we had a fireplace, but we loved living there because it was a fun place. There was lots to do. There was a creek on the place, and we'd play on that and climb trees and pick grapes and do things like that for entertainment. We had to entertain ourselves, but it was fun. I loved living there. And but that house was haunted. I don't know what had happened. No one ever told us what had happened that made this happen. But about between 9 and 9:30 every night, there was a barn below us, and there was horses in there. That's for real. And between 9 and 9:30 at night, we would hear the barn start to fall, and the rusty nails pulling out of the boards, and the horses would start screaming and kicking the walls, and we could hear the barn fall to the ground. And
every night this happened.
And then something would jump on that end of the porch where the barn was and run across and rattle our doorknob and go off on the other end of the porch. And we never saw anything, and the barn didn't fall. It was still the same the next day as it was the day before. But we heard it many, many times. And that was a 2-story house. And it's all gone now. There's not even a pile of rocks where the fireplace was.
I have a photograph of Aunt Belle's house, though.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure who gave it to me.
I
Did you?
took the picture. I saw the house later after we went back there, after Bill and I married. I saw it, and it was still there in, let me think, about 59 was when we took our first trip back there. We married in 49, And then we took our first vacation back to Arkansas. I hadn't seen my grandpa or my relatives since we left Arkansas. And so...
Back just to stop there on the ghost. At that point, so you had the experience of the woman, the angel, who gave the money to your mom for the bus ride, and then this experience. So a lot of supernatural experiences for a young person to have. It's so young.
And there was more later. When Loretta and I were expecting our first babies, she lived in Covina, and we lived in El Monte, and I was over there one day, and between her and the railroad was about a block and a half over there, and it was a fresh plowed field, no trees, no plants at all, no bushes or nothing. And hobos went up and down the railroad all the time, and so this guy knocked on her door one day, and he said, "Ma'am, could I have a sandwich? I haven't eaten for 2 days." And she said, "Well, sure." So she made him a sandwich and a glass of water, and after he ate that one, he said, "Would you mind if I could have another sandwich, please?" And she said, "Of course." And so she made him another sandwich, another glass of water, and she turned around to hand him the second glass of water, and he was gone. And she went out the door with the glass of water in her hand to give it to him, and he wasn't anywhere. And so she said, "Well, where did he go?" And I said, "I don't know. I didn't even see him because I was in the living room, but I heard him and talking to her." And so I went out the back door, and she went one way, and I went the other way, and we looked, and there was no footprints in that fresh plowed sand, and none of the neighbors saw him. Nobody saw him but us. And we knocked on 2 or 3 doors on either side. "Did you see that man? That hobo that I just gave him a sandwich and I was going to give him a glass of water." No, nobody saw him but us. And there was no footprints in the field.
How did you explain that to yourself? I mean, what do you think it was?
We just realized there had to be angels, because Jesus said that we entertain angels many times unaware.
So an angel, maybe in that case, came just to see if you would offer the sandwich.
Yeah, just to test our hearts, to see if we would feed them or not. Because he said he was invited to dinner one time in the Bible. He was invited to dinner, and the guests had dinner already, and a bum came to the door and asked for something to eat, and they said, "No, I'm sorry, we're expecting guests, and so tonight, so I'm sorry, we don't have anything." And so he went away, and 3 times somebody knocked on the door and asked for something, and they wouldn't feed them because they were expecting Jesus to come and have dinner with them. And later they said, "We had dinner all ready for you. What happened? You didn't come." And he said, "I came 3 times and you didn't feed me. And I was sick and you didn't take care of me. And I was hungry, you didn't feed me. And I was naked and you didn't clothe me." And so we knew, we were taught that. I remember when I was, 2 or 3 years old, we knew that Jesus lived at our house. In my mind, I can see him as a little kid running around in our house. He was invisible, of course, but to me he was real. He was just a little boy there, just like us. And we were very conscious of Jesus being there, always. And we grew up with that. And we never doubted for a minute that it was real, And Mama had instilled that in us somehow. I don't know how the others feel about that, but I know what my experience was. And I can see him in my mind just playing with us kids, running around there playing with us.
Fascinating.
And he was about 3 or 4 years old. I can see him. And I just always knew he was there. There was never a doubt that Jesus wasn't with me wherever I went.
Throughout your life, have you ever felt a time that Jesus wasn't with you, that you didn't have that faith?
No, never. Never, ever, never did I think he wasn't with me. I knew he was. But when I had that nervous breakdown in '61, I was in really bad shape, and I knew God was there. I couldn't feel Him, and I'd reach, and I'd stretch, and I'd reach, and I couldn't touch Him. He was just right there, but I couldn't touch Him. But in the front of me, there was like a fishing line, a invisible, like transparent fishing line. It hung in front of me, and I knew that was God. I
So
knew
you
He
had
was
the
with
line
me.
to God.
And I said, "Okay, Lord, I don't feel anything. I'm absolutely dead inside. I don't feel nothing. But I haven't done anything to turn my back on you, and you said you'd never leave me. And so I know that you're still with me, and I'm just going to walk with you by what I know in my head and in my heart. I'm just going to keep walking with you anyway." And I did. And it was 14 years. I was sick. But I never doubted He was with me.
That was a severe depression that you had during that time,
Severe
do you think?
depression. I had a nervous breakdown. And I didn't get any treatment. I should have had treatment, but nobody realized how sick I was.
Yeah, and at that time, it wasn't as acceptable, and it wasn't as prevalent as like mental health care is today.
No, but it was like I did see the reason people didn't realize that I was in the shape I was in. I still functioned. I still did the laundry. I still took care of my kids and cleaned the house and did all the things. But they didn't know that inside of me was a tornado that no one could see I was dealing with. And I had not one soul to talk to, nobody. I went to, Loretta came, no, Shirley came by, and she saw me, how bad I was, and she realized, because she'd had a nervous breakdown too. And so she went back down to Pomona, where Mama lived in Ontario, and Mama said, "I think I should go see about Jane." And Shirley said, "No, Mama, please don't go up there, because she's really bad, and you might, if you see her like she is, you might have a breakdown yourself, and I don't want that to happen." So nobody came. I didn't have any help.
So that made it even worse, because you didn't have your family with you to help you through it.
I didn't have any. I couldn't turn to nobody. I went over to Mackey's one day, and she said, "Well, Jane, I don't know how to help you, because I got problems of my own." And so I just turned around and went back home. But thank you. And it was 14 years that I was sick. But
that's just horrible.
I never ever doubted that God was with me, because I could see that invisible line in the front of me. And I just said, "I'm going to walk with you. Whether I ever feel your presence again, I'm going to walk anyway," because I didn't do nothing to separate us. And so I'm just going to keep going. And that's what I did.
What helped you out of that? Or what happened after 14 years? When did you start to feel well again?
Well, the experience of where I was that nobody could see, I was in it was like an old-fashioned telephone booth, the old stand-up telephone booths.
Right.
But there was no windows. It was iron. It was about 1-inch iron sheets. It was welded together, and in my mind, I could see the beading on the outside, but I was inside. And I could see the beading all around where it was welded together, and there was no way out, and nobody could see me in there. And I couldn't say nothing to nobody, because I was in there, and so no one understood. But that was the experience, that I was locked away. But I know now that it was my spirit that was locked away. It was in battle. And so 14 years, we moved to Arkansas in the meantime, and that was at Escalon when we lived there. I was sick.
Yeah.
And then when we moved to Arkansas, uh, 14 years later, Steve and Bill went to work one morning, and Steve was the only kid we had at home then. And I just knelt down by the couch, and I said, "Okay, Lord, today, you've got to set me free. I can't go on." And I just kind of passed out. I don't know what happened, but I didn't know what happened. But I woke up 2 hours and 8 minutes later. I looked at the clock, and it was 2 hours and 8 minutes later, I remember, and I was free. And I said, "Wow, what do you know? What do you know? I'm free. I'm really free. I'm really free." And I was really excited, and I was there all by myself.
Feeling.
And yeah, it was. And I said, now I can be myself. I don't have to pretend to be anybody that other people. I always tried to please other people, whatever they wanted me to do,
Yeah.
and that's what I did. And if they said you don't do this or you don't do that, I didn't do that, and I didn't go there. And I tried to be all things to all people,
Yeah,
and
you can't do that.
it didn't work.
Yep.
And
No one can do that.
no, but I tried. And then when I sat up and I said, "I'm free," then I said, now I can be myself. I can be who I really am. But it changed me. It took something.
Those 14 years changed you?
Hmm.
So,
I didn't have the self-confidence that I had after that I had before, because I thought, if anybody can do it, I can. That was my attitude before. But now I say, I don't know about this. I'm not sure. Can I do this or not?
What years were those?
That was in, we moved to Arkansas in 69. September 6th, 1969, we moved to Arkansas. That was some woolly trip we took. It took us a week to get there. And
so from about 54 until 68, you were in that stage?
no, it was 61 it was 61 when I had the nervous breakdown in
Okay.
Escalon.
Uh-huh.
And then we moved to Arkansas in 69.
Okay.
And then you
I
felt
didn't,
better in 75?
I didn't get set free until 14 years after that. It was 72, I believe, 70. Probably, well, it had to be 74. But it was 14 years. And I was really, it was a big day when I was set free, but it did really change me. I don't have that confidence now. When I'm driving, if I pull up, sometimes when I'm driving and if I'm upset about something, stressed, I'll pull up to a stop sign and I say, "There's a stop sign. Am I really going to be able to stop? Can I do this?" And I don't know if I'm going to run that stop sign or not. I've never not stopped, but the thought goes through my mind, am I going to be able to do this? You know,
Yeah.
I'm not, and it's scary.
Is it I'm curious about this. Is it a feeling of, can I do this? Can I make the car stop? Or is it possible for the car to stop, if you know
My
what I'm
body,
saying?
no, my
So
body. Is my body going to, am I going to put my foot on the brake?
Uh-huh.
That feeling, it's me.
Yeah.
I'm the dysfunctional one, not the car. But I've never, ever had an accident.
Do you want to talk about what you think brought on those 14 years?
About what?
What started those 14 years? And you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but
Yeah, I can, but it's not very nice.
well, it's up to you if you want to talk about it. I mean, it's something that, could be
Well,
shared.
Bill was running around with other women all of our married life. And I knew it, but everybody was telling me, Mama told me that I made my choice and I had to make it work. But one person can't make it work unless you're both willing. One person can't do it, you know.
That's right.
And he wouldn't quit, and I stuck it out because everybody was telling me that I married him, I had to make it work, and I stayed with him. And that was part of what happened. And another thing that happened at the very beginning of the nervous breakdown was something at church happened, and my pastor told a lie. He told me to order some David's He Cook Literature, which is Baptist, and we were Pentecostal.
Mm-hmm.
And when it came, the Sunday school teachers wouldn't teach out of it. They said, I'm not teaching out of this Baptist stuff because I'm Pentecostal. And I said, it's good basic doctrine, and you can add what you want to it, you know. I mean, we believe in speaking in tongues and the Holy Spirit. And I said, you can add that to, but the scripture is strongly taught in the Baptist churches. It's very good doctrine. And I said, you can add to it. And at the same time, the pastor was gone to convention for 2 weeks. John Cole was his name. And when he got back, the biggest mouth teacher in the church, he went to see her first, and she said, who gave them the authority to order this literature? And he saw that she was mad. She said, I'm not teaching out of this stuff, bless God. And so then he said, I didn't tell them to do that. I didn't tell them to order that literature. They just took it on themselves to do it.
So he hung you out to dry.
So that, yeah, he did.
Yeah.
And the superintendent, the Sunday school superintendent, called me, and he said, Janie, are you sitting down? And I said, no, but I will. And he said, you should. He said, Brother Cole is back, and he said that he didn't tell us to order that literature, and the church is really mad. The people is really mad at us. And so the lady, there was a one-legged lady minister taking care of the church at that time, and she said she had helped Brother Cole out many times when he was on vacation or gone to convention. She'd come and take care of the church for him. And so I went and talked to her, and she said, well, Janie, I know that you're telling me the truth because Jay Davidson, the superintendent, was just here, and he told me the same story, word for word, that you just told me. And so she said, I know that it's true. And she talked to him, and he never would admit it. And she said, you're going to get in that pulpit and tell the church that you did tell those kids to order that literature. But he never would. Never did. And finally died. But later, when we moved to Escalon, just shortly along that same time, and when I went back, and he opened the door and saw me, and he ran.
Is that right?
Yeah.
He wouldn't deal with it at all then?
No, he never did deal with it. So then we moved to Arkansas from Escalon. We moved back to El Monte for about a year, and then on to Arkansas. But that was, between the two things, that was the reason I had a nervous breakdown.
How did that affect you in your church? Did you continue to go to that church?
No, I couldn't go there anymore because the people would not accept me. They believed him and not us. And they wouldn't accept me.
And so that not only did it test your faith by knowing that a pastor would lie like that, but it separated you from your community too.
Well, not from the faith, because God don't change. I knew that was a mistake. People make mistakes. God doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
But they never believed us. They believed him because he was the pastor. Mm-hmm. And Jay and Kathy moved back to Indiana, and we're still in contact after all these years. And so then when we moved to Arkansas,
I'm sorry, I'm fiddling with this.
I got a divorce and came back to California on my own.
From Uncle Bill?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I divorced him for 2 years.
Did you remarry?
No, neither one of us did. He started to.
Did you remarry each other?
He lived with another woman. While we were divorced, he moved in with another woman.
Did you marry each other again?
Yeah. Yeah, when I went back, we married again, but it was a mistake.
Yeah.
If it don't work the first time, it doesn't work the second time. Because I don't think that his heart changed. I think he still today, if he was in good health and could, he would still do the same thing. But he would beat me up, and even tied me with ropes and beat me in the face, and
Oh.
and I wouldn't fight back because I thought adults don't do that. You know,
Uh-huh.
you're supposed to be able to talk. And so I wouldn't hit back for 13 years. He did that. And finally I sought help. I went to 8 different pastors, and they all said, you made your bed lie in it, in essence, you know. And then one pastor I went to, and he said, he was Presbyterian, and I never saw him before nor after. And he was my best friend, Margaret Bodley. I'm sure you've heard about her.
Mm-hmm.
She was a precious woman, and she said, why don't you go talk to my pastor? He'll understand. And I did. And he said, well, I don't know you or your circumstances, but if you're telling me the truth, you have a scriptural right to divorce the man and remarry. And that's true, because adultery is the only reason in the Bible that you can divorce and remarry for.
Uh-huh.
And so, you know, that's what it was. And I had a legal right, but I shouldn't have went back. That was a mistake.
So what do you think
It
now?
didn't change.
Because this is something as that our culture is kind of going through some changes here. When you were young, that was pretty standard culturally, that a woman divorce didn't
Stuck it
happen
out.
then.
No.
You stuck it out.
You stuck it out. No matter what, you stay with it.
And now we don't have that stigma anymore, that also if
No.
a woman did divorce, then she was stigmatized in that culture, and that's pretty much gone. But now we have rampant divorce.
Yeah. Well, I believe that if you have an abusive relationship, either way, the man or the woman abusing the other, you don't have to live with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't hold to the strong doctrine that you don't have the right to marry again if you didn't cause the problem.
Mm-hmm.
You have a right to marry again, the way I feel,
Yeah.
because if you don't do anything to cause it and the other person is unwilling to comply or change or straighten up, then you have a right to get out of there.
Yeah.
And why should you live alone when you didn't do anything?
Exactly. Why be unhappy?
Yeah,
You know?
so I feel like you have a right to remarry, but I just didn't want to because I hadn't had a good experience with men. My dad wasn't a good experience. My
Mm-hmm.
husband wasn't a good experience, and I thought, why bother, you know?
Yep.
Just leave them alone. Don't go there. So that was what I finally concluded, and I still feel that way. If anything happens to Bill,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't even be interested in marrying again.
Mm-hmm.
But
I only have 2 minutes of tape left, so we should probably wrap it up there and pick up,
yeah,
and maybe take a break and
Yeah.
pick it up tomorrow.
I'd like to talk to you some more because there were some things I wanted to ask you.
okay, go ahead.
I'd like to get them on tape tomorrow, hopefully.
Is that okay, or do you want to keep going now?
Go ahead, doesn't
Well,
matter.
Okay,
I
let me
hope
change the
answer
tape.
would be more than 2 minutes long.
Yeah, let me.
I was well loved, and I felt very secure, and never ever doubted that my family loved me and would be there for me. When I was 7 years old, I had typhoid fever, and that comes from your outdoor toilet being too close to your water well. That's what makes typhoid fever.
Mm-hmm.
Move over here in the shade, son. Okay, if you get in the picture, I don't care.
Okay.
And I was
Okay, so
sick
I'll
for
sit over
three months, and too weak to walk. I had to learn to walk all over, and they gave me quinine, which, ew, yuck.
Bitter.
It was
tasting, huh?
terrible, and that was the only medicine that they had that would work with typhoid fever. And I was the only one in the family that got it. I remember the day that I took sick, I went to school, and we just lived around the corner from the school. And I went to school, and Loretta and I walked home for lunch, and I had a headache. And I told Mama, I said, I'm sick, and I'm going to lay down. And I thought by the time lunch hour was over, I could go back to school, and I couldn't get out of bed. And so I was sick for 3 months with that.
Was it a bad fever all day long, or was it like having the flu constantly?
It probably felt like the flu, but I had a high fever, real high fever.
Mm-hmm.
And they would people would give me things, money and dimes and even dollars, and we Daddy bought me a little radio flyer wagon.
Oh yeah?
And when my legs were too weak to walk, why, they would put me, Maxine and Gladys would put me in that wagon and wheel me around. Gladys was a funny person. She would, if I was sick, she was afraid I was going to die, so she was always my best friend. And then when I was well, if I got a whipping, she'd laugh at me. So she would change if I was okay, but she was afraid I would die and she'd have a guilty conscience. So when I was sick, she was real good to me.
She was next older to you, right?
Yeah, she's between Maxine and me. Now, questions.
Oh, I wanted to ask you, in your family, did you and organize it, or would it just happen?
It just happened, but when we lived in Arkansas, we had what we call and anyone would bring their instruments and some Jews harps and no basses, several guitars. Wouldn't work rock time. I remember Curly, 6 years old, into that music. Girl, she played the piano good. I remember there were kids that would gather. That's what I want, and never had one. And Marty, really, really bad. Came in, so we thought the piano there, so we'll have to begin to pray. Find one, and I not yet. And I went back and said, and he said, I said, okay. And he said, no.
So this is you.
I had 3 kids. Off the end of the wire, and no, that's not the one to look. When I see it, I'll know if you ain't it is now. And it means the there and Jackie Barn, and it was, and this pier. That's the one that I $5 and. It had beautiful oak leaf, what do you call it? Decals, wood decals on the lid. It was beautiful, and I stripped it down, and I didn't know how to varnish to make it look pretty, but I did the best I could, and I had it for about 20 years, and I learned. And I would hear something I would hear somebody do something because I didn't know how to read music. And I would hear somebody do something, and I guess because of the music that was in me already from the family, I would record that in my head, and I would go home and I would try it and try it and try it. And if I couldn't do it, I would get down by my piano bench and I'd say, Lord, help me learn this. I really want to play this piano. And I shed many tears on my piano bench, and then and sometimes I would be playing along and I'd make a mistake and I'd say, that was pretty, I'm going to adopt that. So I did, and that's how I learned to play. But the Grandpa and Uncle Lola and Daddy, all of them played music, and all their kids, all of them play music nearly. Everybody in our family plays a little bit of something. Maxine used to play guitar real pretty, but she quit.
Never plays anymore.
No, she quit when she was young, and she played a little bit of piano and
accordion.
And Frank plays a French harp real pretty, and he sings alto. He doesn't know that he harmonizes. He said, "No, I can't." And I said, "You do too. I got you on tape." And he didn't. He said, "No, I can't sing." And I said, "You do too." And
did you have a favorite song you like to sing when you all got together? I know you liked Amazing Grace.
Usually we like to sing The Lifeboat, and we like to sing, "You can have a melody down in your heart when it's aching, almost breaking." And we sing that one. And there's several of them that we sing. The Lifeboat.
Sing
We're
that one.
floating down the stream of time. There's several that we sing when we get together. The same ones. Or the King and I walk down life's road together, where many people go passing by. The greatest one and I, a lonely beggar, walk hand in hand. The King and I, why he should care for me will always be a mystery. He holds the whole world in his hand, but what am I And so my heart somehow can't help but wonder why we're together, the king and I. That's one of the ones that we sing together.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, we all sing. When Grandpa, he had him and Grandma Sylvia had two boys and a girl after Grandpa Ida and Grandpa and Grandma Ida had the three boys, and they play music too. And their youngest son Michael wanted Grandpa's banjo. That was what he played: a banjo or a fiddle or a guitar, a mandolin, a French harp. Grandpa could play anything, like Daddy could. And so Grandpa gave it to him, and he put it in his closet. And one day, there was something up on the shelf he needed to get. He couldn't reach it. He's short of stature, and he stepped on that banjo and broke it all to splinters. And so that was the end of Grandpa's banjo. And I was at J.E.'s. That's their oldest son. That's his oldest son with Sylvia. I was back there visiting him one time, and he got a package in the mail from my daddy. And he said, "Well, what is this he sent me?" And when he opened it up, it was his fiddle, my dad's fiddle. And I thought, why didn't he send that to Frank? That should be Frank's. You know, Frank is the only boy he had. He should have sent it to him, not to his brother, who already had a fiddle. But he has Daddy's fiddle.
Do you have any contact with those boys anymore?
Yeah, when I go back there, I see them. And I stay with Daddy's half-sister, Wanda. We're real close. We call back and forth, and she tells me, I never had a sister, but if I did, we couldn't be any closer than I feel to you.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah, and so she calls me if anybody, cousins or anybody dies, she calls and lets me know.
Is she the one who, she and her husband are in a bluegrass, have a bluegrass
No,
band?
that was Elaine and Hank. Hank and Elaine.
Yep.
They play old time folk music. And she plays one of those harpsichords, and they played at the Ozark Mountain Museum for several years, but they moved back to Oregon now. But her husband plays several instruments too. He plays a guitar mainly, and he can play a bass and a fiddle. And they play professionally around to different musical groups that gather.
And they even have recordings at it, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I have several. I have all of their cassettes that they had up to the time when I seen them last. Yeah, we're from a real musical family. Singing, everybody sings. None of us that I know of can't carry a tune.
Do you know where it all started? If it was it all Grandpa Godfrey?
For my memory, it was Grandpa Godfrey that was the first one that had the back porch singings, and people up there would bring their instruments and play music in the yard too. And when we lived at Linnell, let me tell you how we came out here the first time. Was in that little Model A coupe Daddy bought, and he took the turtle hull out and made a little truck out of it. A lot of people were doing that at that time. And so we all the kids all loaded up in the back and with what few belongings we could bring, and we still had old Lois, and we lived down in McClellan, Arkansas. And we were staying with Uncle Harley at that time because we were coming to California, so we'd already left our house. And we left old Louis with Uncle Harley, and we'd been with him for 12 years. You know, we'd had him a long time. And so he laid beside the road and turned his nose following our car. We wanted to bring him, but Daddy wouldn't let us. And and he laid there by the road. It took him 2 weeks to die. And Uncle Olin would take him back to the house, and Uncle Harley, Mama's brother, would take him to the house and feed him, and he would drag himself right back to the road and look in the direction we left, and he grieved himself to death because he was our brother, you know.
He knew he belonged to be. He should have been with you.
And they wouldn't let him come with us, but it took us a week to get out here, and we'd camp on the side of the road and just sleep on the ground, and Mama would usually fry a big skillet full of potatoes for breakfast or supper, whatever meal it was. We had fried potatoes. And they left Arkansas. Daddy said he had $19 in his pocket. And he's got 6 kids. And he had a young man, was 19 years old, Earl Bumgardner was his name. And he could drive because Mama couldn't drive, so he was Daddy's relief driver. And the 3 of them rode up front, and we kids had to ride in the back. And we stopped on the Globe Mountains, and that was really scary. We had a flat, and the Globe Mountains, they told us that it was 300 foot down, and there was no curb or no shoulder on the road. It was just down. And we had this flat, and so they got out to change it.